All right, the hour of 6:30 having arrived, I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Columbus Plan Commission for Thursday, August 11th to order. Kyle, will you call the roll, please?
Motive?
Aye, or here.
Albright?
Here.
Kylan is absent. Baston?
Here.
Traxler?
Here.
Monday?
Present.
Myers?
Present.
All right, we have a quorum. Item 3, notice of open meeting. This meeting has been properly posted and noticed in accordance with state law. Kyle?
Correct.
All right. Item 4, we have the agenda in front of us. Please review it, and I'll entertain a motion to approve as written or amend.
Motive will make a motion to approve the agenda. Albright will second that.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? This is our agenda. Number 5, minutes from July 21. Those are also in your packets. Please take a moment to review. Again, I'll entertain a motion to approve as written or amend.
Motive will make a motion to approve the minutes as written. Albright will second that.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by aye. Aye. Opposed? Minutes are approved. All right. We'll move on to item number 6. Item 6 is a space for citizen comments. This item is separate from the item for the conditional use permit. So these are of a general nature. If anybody has a comment of a general nature, you're welcome to speak it now.
This isn't pertaining to the 240 North Birdsey? Is that what you're saying?
No, that's a separate section in the meeting. This is for general citywide comments.
Understood.
All right. Anyone? All right. No citizen comments. Were there any entered for the record of a general nature?
I shared an email with all the commissioners about emailed comments.
About the proposal?
About the proposals, yes.
Okay. All right,
You have
but
this in print copy?
I can print them off for you.
Tried to download it after I got it a few hours ago. Not download it.
okay.
Okay.
But nothing of a general nature.
Correct.
Great. All right. That's item 6.
So they can have a hard copy.
All right. Item 7, unfinished business. There's nothing on the agenda. Commissioners, is there anything unfinished you're aware of?
No.
Okay. We'll move on to item 8, which is new business. First up, we have the public hearing to review the request of a conditional use permit for a hazardous materials storage facility at 240 North Birdsey Street. There's a lot of folks in the room here tonight, so I thought I would quickly go over how the procedure here goes. I saw you signed in here. I did see a few people come in after the meeting started. This is the sign-in sheet if you wish to make public comments. So if you have not signed it, came in late and want to sign it, please come up. What we'll first do is have the applicant, who is here, briefly introduce the proposal. He has agreed to field questions from the public. So what I will do after he's done making whatever presentation he wants to make, I'll go down the list. You can ask questions of the applicant. You can ask questions to us, which this is not a back and forth right now between commission and the public, okay? So this is for, if you wish to have us ask a question of the applicant later, that's what that's for. Comments about the proposal are for this time. and to be entered into the record. So we'll go through this list. Once we're finished with people making comments that have signed in, I'll call 3 times for last comments, and after that, I'll close the hearing. After the hearing happens, we'll have our own deliberation in which we will ask questions and have conversation among ourselves in a public venue here. Possible outcomes of that, after we deliberate, we could table the matter to a future meeting. So we've held the public hearing, and so that wouldn't be held again, but we could potentially table for a future meeting, or we can make a recommendation to council either to approve or deny the conditional use permit. The council is the body who actually makes the decision based on the proposal and our recommendation. Kyle, did I leave anything out?
No, I think that captures it.
Great. All right. The applicant is here. Will you come up to the podium, give your name, and if you have anything you want to say about the proposal, please go ahead and say it.
This is on, ready to go?
There's a face with some sound, now it's on. There you
It
go.
is?
You haven't
Okay.
turned it on. Yep.
My name is Eric Cushman. I hope to see this many people, at my next birthday. I realize a lot of you are here to kind of get some, have some questions, comments, concerns, and I am readily available. That's why I'm here. I'm the owner, the sole owner, president of E-Way Transit. I started that company about 7.5 years ago, and for any of you other business owners, I've been through COVID and every other obstacle. For years, my customers, and I work generally with manufacturers, distributors of chemicals in the Midwest. So we have our own private fleet. I've got my own drivers. Each truck and trailer is about $250,000. There's a lot that goes into just operating the trucking side of things, but they've always come back to me and said, is there any way that you can store supplies? And supplies could be anything from empty totes, drums, oil dry, spill containment systems, to the chemicals themselves. And those are usually stored in 55-gallon drums and totes. And I've always kind of looked at sites, looked at various areas where I'd want to be positioned. And most of my customers, for your knowledge, are Minnesota, Wisconsin. And this corridor right here is really perfect. I've done work, and I do work with Columbus Chemical, Brentag out of Menominee Falls, Hawkins, Hydrite. Some of these names may be familiar. But in order to do business with those guys, you have to operate, top notch. My insurance, I've got $5 million umbrella coverage, plus what I have to operate the trucks. And I can tell you that is not cheap. Just on the trucking side of things, my insurance costs are about $25,000 a month just to insure the trucks. So I've gone, back and forth with the customers and figured, no better time than now. I think some of you've got my letter that I sent out and looked at it, but, I've been married 26 years. I always run stuff, through my wonderful wife saying, hey, look, this is kind of the next phase. This is what I like to do. And, what do you think of it? And I just think it's a natural progression for my business to take the next step so we can house some of these chemicals, but also a lot of supplies. I met with the fire chief about a week ago and just kind of walked through the facility and just kind of explained to him how, we'd be looking to operate, what we look to store. First and foremost, it takes time to get this thing going. I'll be honest with you. I mean, it's not like if it was approved that next week there would be 20 trucks rolling in and all sorts of noise. I've got to put quite a bit of money in the facility just to get it up to spec or how I'd need to operate. It doesn't have heat. I'd have to put in radiant heating, so there's no potential for sparking. There's other issues, some structural, some roof. So again, it's a commitment on my end, not only to maintain our fleet, but also to look at a property and go, okay, how does this fit in the equation? And so again, what you could imagine, people I know, worst case idea, oh my gosh, there's going to be drums outside, there's going to be all sorts of trucks. This is going to be kind of a low volume facility. I don't know what my previous tenants, predecessors, how they operated. I can tell you that right now there's 2 docks. You might see in the next 6 months 1 or 2 loads a day. Because what we do is fairly specialized. It's not a high volume. I'm not an LTL company. I'm not operating from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. Hours, as I indicated, are pretty much going to be 7, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. No weekend, nothing at night. All my drivers are on, we're on electronic logs. We're highly regulated. I went through a full DOT audit about 1.5 years ago to get a permit for one of my customers. And again, any of you business owners, nobody likes audits. I mean, that's a DOT official coming into my office and going through payroll, paperwork, workers' comp, you name it, insurance. During COVID, PPP, I was one of the lucky people that got audited by the government for the funds that I got. I'm a small player, about $5 million a year. I got audited, and the banker couldn't believe it. So I've been through audits, you name it, I've been through it. So again, there's a huge trust factor, but I just looked at this facility, this location, why it appealed to me is, 1, the size of it, to be honest, it's a good size facility. 2, the location. Again, we've got customers Menominee Falls, Waukesha, Racine, Green Bay, Minneapolis, Fond du Lac. It works out perfect. And, the good highways, familiar with the area. And also, to be honest, the location. I mean, there's a railroad track on one side. I like that from security purposes, to be honest with you. Homes on the other side, that could be a positive or negative. I know many people would be like, you see a home, don't even bother. That's trouble. I look at it as it's trust. If I've got people looking out for my business, calling me on my cell phone, hey, there's some guy like snooping around your trucks. Like I said, there's a lot of money in that equipment. That's what I like, okay? From your standpoint, I know you're going to have questions and comments and concerns. I'm more than happy to address them, but I look at it for the location, the size of it. The inside of it's really nice. I mean, there are things that have to be gutted. The bathrooms are atrocious. I wouldn't show any of you those. The front office area needs to be cleaned up, but it's a good facility. It's been around a long time. And what's kind of odd, 60 years ago, businesses were built downtown and everyone loved it. You walk to work. Now you don't want them by the homes, and I understand that. So again, I'm more than happy to address your concerns, types of chemicals, how we handle it, training, anything you want to ask, feel free to fire away. This is, my opportunity to look at something and go, boy, this would be a great fit for what I want to do, and people can ask questions and go from there.
All right, thank you, Eric.
Yep.
All right, I have a question here. Well, I'll get to it. First, we have Brett Ellis of 328 Waterloo Street.
Hi. So just a quick disclaimer. I work in the maintenance at the current Gar Plastics, which used to run that building, who have no relationship now with Gar Real Estate. I have no conflict of interest here. I'm just a citizen. So it's really important. So I'm in a unique position that I have intimate knowledge of this building. I'm in maintenance, and everything he says is correct. Bathrooms are atrocious, roof issues. I'm not a NIMBY guy. I don't mind his business or what he wants to do. I think they're so regulated. I'm not worried about what he's storing there. My concerns are that building is not meant for what, as it stands right now, he said he's going to invest, is not meant for hazardous material. The drainage system goes into the sewer drain. There are drains directly from the floor to the sewer drain that then go into the river, which not only affects us, but everyone downriver and all the ecosystem involved. Second, the siding that on the outside that connects to the concrete that goes through the ground is not sealed. So a containment is literally impossible. So as it stands right now, if all changes are made, I have no issue with this, by the way. But also, there's no sprinkler system whatsoever installed. And I don't know the regulations that go in with a company that has these, so I don't know if one would need to be installed. I have no idea. But as of right now, if there was a fire, there would be no suppression, a fire suppression system in place. So I'm not concerned about, I've dealt with trucking, I've dealt with warehouses, I've dealt with the industrial. I'm not concerned about the traffic. I'm not concerned about drivers are talented. I'm not concerned about all that or what he wants to do. It's just as it stands, that building is not suitable. Containment would be impossible. And if, God forbid, a fire would break out and the roof. So also in industrial buildings, anyone who's worked a warehouse knows you anchor equipment to the ground. You pound the anchors down into the, back down in all the way when you remove the equipment. So not only are the drains, not only are the walls, but the actual concrete itself, I know because I removed the equipment. There are holes in the ground. Lastly, this building has had several break-ins under GAR, plastics alone, and while it's been sitting vacant. There's glass windows, some are plexiglass, because I've had to replace 27 broken windows. We've found teenagers do what teenagers do and drink, find a place to go drinking. We've found, so there has been people in the building without any supervision. Obviously, a business isn't going to leave millions of dollars of investment sitting there unprotected. So I'm not overly concerned about that, to be honest, but it is something that should be raised. So, yeah, that's all I have to say. I thought you guys should know the true nature of this building. I helped move GAR out of that building. I did not work there when it operated. Only maintenance, paid grunt. I have no interest in anything other than what's right for Columbus.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Quick mic check. Can the sound booth hear what's coming out of the mic at the podium? And Mike, can you hear what's coming out at the podium?
On Zoom, I cannot, it was tough. Hearing
Okay.
what he was saying.
Okay. Okay, perfect. So speakers, when you come up, be conscientious of the mic. So, thank you. Okay. Next on the list, we have John Scoville, like units. All right, 334 West Mill Street.
Hi. My property directly abuts this property. In addition to the concerns I have for the health and safety of the community, I am concerned about my property value going down. If you drive past my house, you'll see there's a for sale sign out there. Monday, my house is listed. I've been informed by my realtor and their attorney that even though this hasn't passed, I am obligated to disclose. And morally, that's something I would do anyways. I'll be brief. There may or may not be an accident or a spill, but I can guarantee you from what I've been told that this will drive down my property value and affect my sale of my home. I've lived in this town for 26 years, loved it here. I'm going to help my elderly parents, so this is a move that's gonna happen one way or another, but this house is basically my retirement in addition to what I earn as a business owner, but I would really hate to see this go through, so I just wanted to make that clear. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next on the list, I have Bill Bruns, but I see under the topic, it's something about current ordinances.
Bring that up with it both.
Yeah.
It'll be all together in one.
If you want to comment on this proposal, please do.
It'll be part of this proposal.
things of in the interest of time, we want to keep things of general
I'll
nature.
make it brief and short.
Keep to this proposal, please.
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
It's directly to this proposal. I live at 352 West Mill Street. I live right on the corner where all the trucks come through. And I don't mind the idea, he's only got a couple trucks coming in, that's good. But my biggest concern is I drive forklift and there's plastic containers and I deal with them. And you don't know if you poke a hole in the bottom of it, you may not even know the stuff is draining out in the back. But the storm sewer is right directly downhill all the way along the whole side of the building, and it runs right into the river. It's a very short route there. And that's my first concern. My second concern is when Columbus Chemicals burned, there was a big, we were just fortunate the wind carried the smoke the other way. But my concern is, I hope it never happens, but you're gonna have to come up with a pretty major evacuation plan if this smoke goes through the middle of town. And, that's pretty much, and my other concern is years ago when Gar Plastics was there, they had stuff piled forever. I'd look out my back window and I'd see plastic bales and steel cages and everything else stacked 10, 12 feet tall. And every time I came to the city with a concern about this, they told me that they had no ordinances on the books to control that. So that was my concern about the ordinance, because I would like to see something done. It's just not me, it could be anybody else in town. And thanks for your time.
Thank you. Next on the list, we have Lisa Famularo, 324 West Mill. Please correct me if I have butchered your name. That goes for
You
anybody
did a
in the
pretty
room.
good job, actually. That's a pretty good job. Famularo. So hi, Plan Commission. Thanks for taking the time to hear us tonight. And hi, neighbors. Also, thank you for all showing up. This is really, I don't think I've seen so many of my neighbors at once ever before. So, hey, right? And thanks to Eric for being so transparent about what you do. I guess I don't have a whole lot to say. My concerns echo those of my neighbors. Most of all, I'm worried about the storm drains. I am worried about our infrastructure. Should we have an incident? I've recently been introduced into the world of emergency management, and it's kind of terrifying to me that we may not have a plan and may not have the resources to deal with an incident that could happen at this facility. That's a concern too. And then also the first gentleman, I'm sorry, I don't remember your name. My property doesn't butt up to this property, but we're pretty close. And I definitely hear the cars doing wheelies and the kids yelling and, shenanigans happening back there. There are definitely a lot of things that can be pretty concerning back in that far corner of Columbus, I guess, to us neighbors, that wouldn't go well with chemicals. So I suppose that's it. Again, thanks for taking the time. And I just urge you to really consider all of the angles when making a decision on this.
All right, thanks, Lisa. Next, we have Travis Hyman, 344 West Mill.
Good evening. I'm Travis Hyman. I live at 344 West Mill Street. I'm here tonight in strong opposition to a conditional use permit request to operate a hazardous material storage facility in the building that is literally 50 feet from my house, my lot line, literally in my backyard. I have several concerns that I outlined in detail, and I emailed all the members of the Plan Commission previously, so I'll try to keep this brief. The types of chemicals being stored here are corrosive, carcinogenic, flammable, and may cause or significantly contribute to an increase in mortality or an increase in serious illness, which may pose a substantial hazard to human health or the environment. And that's the definition of hazardous materials by the DNR. I'm concerned about accidents or mishandling of such materials, which may cause residents to get sick, injured, or have long-term effects to the health and the environment. Evacuation of the neighborhood, especially the daycare, right near this facility, would be dangerous and difficult. I spoke with the daycare director, or my mother did, and she relayed to me that they don't have a vehicle to evacuate the children that are at the daycare, and their evacuation center is the senior center, which would likely also get evacuated. So I'm definitely concerned about evacuation plans. Columbus has experience at Columbus Chemical, an incident, industrial fire, that the saving grace was that it was on the edge of town and not directly into a residential area. Again, my property value, I'm one of the closest residents to this facility. When I purchased the home, obviously I knew there was a factory behind there, but I guess I never prepared for a hazardous materials facility being over there. I don't want to live within 50 feet of these chemicals and the trucks going in and out. I can't imagine if I were to sell my home like John, that somebody else would want to be near that as well. There's a large number of kids that play in the neighborhood, as well as parks, schools nearby, should there be an incident. This building is not designed for hazardous materials and has direct access to the city storm drain. While some of those concerns have been addressed already, it appears to be that it's probably just the bare minimum to get the facility up and running to cover their bases. I urge you to think about the rationale over such facility to be operating in a heavily populated residential area, less than a mile from an active daycare, middle and elementary school, church, parks, senior center, and children playing and families enjoying the neighborhood. Think about the things that have happened in our city's history in regards to industrial accidents and what would have happened if that had been housed in a residential area, much like this proposed location. Think about the properties adjacent to this location who will see significant reduction in their property values. And I'll close with a thought. How would you feel if this was proposed in your backyard? Think about all the things that would apply to you. Please do not approve this conditional use permit. Think about the health and safety of your constituents, property values, and potential dangers to life and the environment. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Travis. And Kyle, his email, is that going to be put into the record also? Good, thanks. All right, next on the list, we have Gary Turk, 406 West Mill.
Well, I guess most of my concerns pretty much already have been addressed, especially with spillage and storm sewers, and you got a river just a few stone throws away, everything flows that way from the tracks. Big storm sewer on my lawn, because I live on the corner of North Main and Birdsey, right where all the trucks will be coming in and out. And right on the lawn, there's a big storm sewer, and everything from them loading docks comes right down to that drain. And when these trucks come in and out, it seems like they cross Birdsey, they stop right there beside the house, get out, open up their doors, bang them to the side of the trailers, whoop in back into the hole in the wall. When they leave, they do the turnaround, they come over, and it goes back many years, all the way back when Metal Fab was there. My grandpa and grandma built that house. We got 4 generations in that house now. And it seems like when they leave, they always want to pull off to the side. My lawn is still screwed up from the last company that was in there. I got a bad back. I'm just sick of doing, lawn maintenance. So if there wasn't that utility box there, I think they'd have a full 8-foot lane off the road onto my property. So the biggest concern is with the noise, you know, the chance of spillage being, you know, direct link right to the river or storm sewers going to the river. And the noise is a big issue with the trucks coming and going. And I know there ain't been nobody in there for a while now, but you still got somebody's coming down there thinking there's a business there. I had one in front of the house again last week making a whole bunch of noise. So now we're talking possibly 4 or 5 reefer units. I don't want to listen to them all night either if they got something in them. I guess other than that, them are my concerns, but seems like most everybody covered most of the other ones, so thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Next, we have Jamie and Casey Nugent. Do you want to speak separately? If so, you're
Both our names.
okay. You're welcome to both speak separately. Okay.
Casey Nugent, 458 West Mill Street. Basically, the building is right behind my house. The office, it would be. I used to deal with the trucks coming in and Google mapping the business and then turning around in my yard. So they'd back up halfway down the street next to some of my neighbors' houses, and then they would try and make the turn and drive through my front yard. So that's a concern of mine for sure. Travis hit a lot of points. So, you know, I'm not going to beat a dead horse. I wanted to go on record just opposing the business being in my backyard for most of the facts that everybody has brought up. What people haven't brought up is, I believe, in 36 inspections of the tractor trailer trucks that you own, there's been 10 violations, 3 accidents, and in 2 of those accidents, there was 2 people harmed and 1 person harmed. That's per the DOTreport.com. Now, if you ask me, 36 inspections, I do concrete for a living, and we have big trucks that get pulled over all the time. All of our foreman trucks that carry Bobcats, very rarely do we get violations on our trucks. Something where it's over a quarter and almost a third of the times that you get inspected, that your trucks are getting violations. I saw at least 2 of them on there, if not 3, that were hazmat specific violations. And it looked like you recently, within the past, since you've owned the business, you haven't always had a hazmat endorsement. Always. So in that time, it shows on record that when you look it up, it says you were not allowed to carry hazardous materials at a certain point, and then around 20.
You have the right MC?
It was your LLC with the address of your business on it. I could go back, I could look online right now and tell you what your DOT numbers and everything were on there. But needless to say, something like that concerns me. You know, because everybody wants to be safe and talk about how safe everything is. Accidents happen, you know, these violations, I'm sure, are not your fault, or, you know, sometimes stuff gets looked over, and I don't want to be near anything that gets looked over, you know. We also have buildings for sale. I drove by today, and just, you know, the APC Way has a building for sale that's in more of an industrial area. It's not right in all of our backyards. You know, that's a building that could, I don't know anything about the inside of the building currently or the other building that's for sale. It's in the same area. It's, you know, off of the railroad tracks, which was a concern of yours. And I just feel like that is more of a building that is built to hold something like that isn't in the proximity of my backyard. Again, everybody brought up great points with everything else. I just wanted to go on record. I did have one more thing, I'm sorry. Oh, agreement with the issues. I don't recall who said it with the boxes from the whole, everything that was stacked up at the old place. Yeah. Even in the parking lot on the other side, I emailed the city probably once every 3 months for 4 years. And it took I believe on the 5th year, they started moving stuff. You know, so I know that you guys have to go through your process of things and it takes time to do things. But, you know, if us concerned citizens, and I'm sure you can tell by the, you know, how many people are here right now, you know, how much we care about what's going on in our neighborhood. If something happens or we see something, to get a 3-year turnaround on one of our concerns, to me, is not acceptable. And so I don't want somebody to come in with, especially with something with, you know, hazardous materials. I realize that, you know, there may be boxes there or chem dry or whatever, but when you put that on top of it, it's really concerning to everybody. Besides that, that's pretty much all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Casey. Next, we have Joe Barassa. Had to fight through the spelling and the handwriting.
I definitely been called worse.
All right, 137 North Birdsey, thank you.
Hi. Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate again that everything was pretty well covered. One thing I just wanted to put a little extra emphasis on was the tracks, and whether there's people in that building or it sits vacant, people like to hang out on those tracks and do whatever people do on the tracks. And, you know, if it's not the stuff that's happened to that building in alone, I mean, if you want to take a peek, go walk under that train bridge and have a peek at the artwork up there. Beautiful stuff. Things are gonna happen back there, and like we said, whether it's through malicious or no fault at all, that's the kind of thing that, you know, I just wanted to, you know, put back out there. But everything else was, you know, same concerns as my neighbors, so thank you.
Okay, thanks, Joe. All right, this one somebody signed. I'm going to guess it's a Martin, 448 West Mill.
Yeah, my name is Martin Sweatmore. I live at 448 West Mill. I think pretty much all my neighbors have hit on all the points I was going to hit. The only thing I would add is I think the DNR should be involved doing a study, or the EPA doing a study. I don't know if that's something you had in the works or was thinking about doing, but if it is approved, I do think that should happen, because the amount of what could go wrong could affect so many people. If they had an explosion, which I'm not talking about just a spill, which could happen, could easily be cleaned up, even that would be very devastating going into the river system, as everybody has said. But if you had an explosion, we have a small fire department. It's a voluntary fire department. It's a great fire department. They do an awesome job. It's very hard to contain something that large in the middle of the city, in a residential area. I know that it's light industrial. I don't consider these type of chemicals light industrial. So I think we should all really look at that and the impact that it could have. I mean, potentially hundreds of people could die or be hurt if there was an explosion there, depending on prevailing winds, and the building is not set up to contain such a blast. It's just that old. So that's all I wanted to say. There are plenty of other buildings. I shouldn't say plenty, but there are a few other buildings in the area that might work out better. I don't know if you've looked at any of the other buildings, but that would be something I would hope that would happen. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
All right, next we have Pat McNichol, 516 West Mill.
I don't need to speak. All my questions have been answered.
Okay. All right, next we have Ann and Mark Thompson, 355 West Mill. Do you both wish to speak?
No, I just wanted to bring up the same concern that some of our neighbors have had with the traffic going through. Those two, that intersection of Main and Mill is not meant for semis. We had stop signs taken out. I believe Bill had a car hit from a semi. They can't make the turn. I mean, if their GPS sends them down the wrong road, the turn is very tight and it cuts into to neighbors' yards. Also, if they come from James Street and come down Main, that's a very narrow street. And I fear for my cars. They tried to fix it with the last company there, and they blocked off half a city block so that there's no parking on that side of the street, which has been very inconvenient for the homeowners there when you don't have enough parking. But that was, all the other concerns were brought up. But I'm right on the corner of Mill and Main, and we've had semis put big ruts in our yard, and I know people know my yard. I have a very well-groomed yard, so nobody was there to fix it. Nobody took liability for it, so we've had to fix it ourselves. So, thank you.
Thanks, Ann. All right. I did notice other people entered after it started. So this will be my first call for other comments. All right, so if you didn't sign the sheet, I will have you come to the podium, state your name and address, and I will write you in.
My name is Ryan Curry. I live at 151 North Birdsey Street. This property or proposed facility is 250 feet from my house. I watched last year in Fort Atkinson when they had a big fire burn out of control in the middle of a neighborhood, and they had to evacuate for something like several blocks away. Their city is bigger than ours. They have a better water system, and they had to stop fighting the fire because they were worried about how much water was in their water tower. Are we going to have enough water for this facility if something goes wrong? God forbid something goes wrong. I mean, we always plan for everything, but what if something goes wrong beyond our scope and our know? Is that going to be the same thing and we're all going to have to evacuate our houses? I just don't think this facility should be there. There's probably 10 different families with children right in that area. It just doesn't make sense. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Your last name, Curry, C-U-R-R-Y or I-E?
Yep.
Thank you. Any others?
Paula Steiner, 442 West James Street. Thank you for allowing this to take place today. I appreciate everyone's time. I am not as close as some of my other neighbors, but I am directly a block away from the facility. I look out my kitchen window and it's there. I am definitely not in support of this business coming to that direct facility. I have 2 children that I would be concerned for their safety if something were to happen. My husband and I are well equipped if we need to evacuate, but why should we have to put our children through that? The other part is I am actually a licensed real estate agent with Keller Williams, and this is directly the definition of a defect. So by allowing this business to come in this type of proximity to homes, you are negatively impacting these homes for potential resale value. And that is all I really have.
Okay. We've made it through our list and the extras. I'll ask a second time, is there anybody else who wishes to speak at this public hearing? Third and final time, anyone else who wishes to speak at the public hearing? All right, this public hearing is closed. We'll move on to item 8B, which is for the commission to review and make recommendation to council regarding the request of Eric Cushman, E-Way Transit LLC, for a conditional use permit for a hazardous material storage facility at 240 North Birdsey. I've got a couple generic questions, more for Kyle. If you guys don't mind me starting with those to kind of a little more broad view, set the table, and then we can get to other items. So first of all, can you clarify exactly what it's the storage of the hazardous chemicals that's the cause for this conditional use? Other storages would be permitted?
Some storage is permitted. So if there wasn't, if they were storing indoors, they would be able to have that, I believe, permitted by right. Any outdoor storage would require conditional use regardless. In this case, the chemicals, if say they were a manufacturer and had these same exact chemicals, they would never visit Plan Commission. They'd just start operating and we'd never know about it. It's the storage of those and not doing anything other than storage that triggers the conditional use.
Kyle, do you know if the sale, the condition, is there a conditional use on the property now for what they did there outside storage previously?
I don't believe there is, which is, at least I didn't see one in the record, but that can happen with properties that are 60 years old and have been operating. But yeah, I don't think there is one in place, and with the cessation of a year, anything would have lapsed by now.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. I know one question that's come up from plan commissioners on other submittals when we go through this checklist for submittal. Items 4 through 10 revolve around a site plan, building plans, grading stormwater plans, lighting plans, landscaping plans, traffic study, or other data. Was that submitted to your office? And if not, was there some specific waiver given, no need for it? Can you explain?
Yeah, so as we do, oftentimes we look at the existing use and look at what the proposed use is, and they're not proposing any changing to the grading of the site. They're not proposing any changing to the lighting of the site. So a lot of those things weren't relevant because there weren't any changes. So those would be, whether they're conforming or not, would essentially be existing uses. The traffic study, that the volume they're talking about would never traditionally fall into a traffic study sort of category because it's just far too little traffic to qualify for that.
Okay. Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Have you spoken with Jason Letha? I assume he's still our city engineer, right? About the width of street on turning radiuses for the and parking?
No, I did not inquire about that. Again, existing industrial site, zoned industrial, existing streets, and they haven't been changed in the width, from my understanding, in the last several years.
Okay. This is maybe a clarification question for you, Eric. So I'm making this like analogy in my head, like I've got too much stuff in my garage. I'm going to rent a mini storage unit somewhere to store my stuff. Is this analogous to what you are doing with companies who use chemicals? They're using your facility as, I hate to use the word overflow, but additional storage for what they need.
Yeah, you're going to find some of the customers, just the way they book sales is, you know, maybe they thought they had a sale, they end up needing to move it in transit, you know, in storage accounts, you know, for how they operate. Customers, like, you know, some of the people I deal with, like that supply ice melt, oil dry, you know, the mundane things like I mentioned, empty drums, totes, they're just going to look to ship it to me, right? And now they can sell to customers here. So, I mean, part of the reason people warehouse in the first place. It gives them a whole new sales opportunity. You know, now they can go back to their parties interested, you know, vendors and say, hey, we have a location in Columbus. I can get you totes to your location in Minneapolis same day. So, I mean, that's part of it as well. So there's some overflow. There's some from just a sales perspective. You know, we booked this, you know, can you store it for us till we find an end user? And then there's also quite a bit of activity for, hey, we need to market our product in your area, but we, you know, don't have anyone that we know or trust. You know, can you do that for us?
So a storage and light distribution components.
Correct.
Okay.
And there's, you know, and just to, you know, stress, we're not doing any blending, packaging, transferring, mixing, anything like that. It's literally just taking in new product or new containers, unused, and storing those.
So, Eric, I have a follow-up question to that. Your hazardous materials storage, does that include hazardous waste material such as, you know, what's used in cleaning out the lines at American Packaging with the ink?
Right, no.
Can I ask a question? I have a question kind of in regard to fire. There's no fire suppression in the building. I know that some chemicals you can't put water on. So what kind of suppression will you be using? And then my alternate question to that is, our emergency team, our police and our fire, are we trained in hazmat cleanup if there's an issue? And if not, how can we get them trained not at the city's cost?
So all of our first responders have some level of hazardous materials awareness training. Our fire department has, you know, higher levels, and some people have gone to additional training. Anything that requires a major response, you get the technical teams out of Madison or other regional. But actually, the fire chief has been in contact with him, and they're comfortable with it, and actually think it expands our ability to respond to hazardous materials, because this is also going to be a storehouse for spill response materials, and that would allow us to, in our normal responses to chemical accidents that might happen at any of the existing factories or any of the highways or the rails, this would be an extra component of safety for the entire community.
And then my other question is in regard to the stormwater and then, of course, the drainage system in the building. If there ever was a leak, how does that get mitigated? And will the city have to have extra testing at the city's cost to ensure that nothing is accidentally leaked into our storm sewer?
Yeah, so that certainly was one of my concerns, because when I toured the facility, you know, there's one large drain, okay, and then there's, you know, some smaller ones. And you think about when people build homes, I mean, my first house I bought had, you know, soil drains. Literally everything in the basement, there's a pipe that just went right down into the ground. I mean, obviously we don't do that anymore, but when this building was built, it was okay to have an inside drain, believe it or not, leading to a river. For our usage, and this is something I would have to go through the city, I'd block it off. I mean, I don't need, you know, that drain there. There is testing ports on site, you know, from previous owners for that property. But anything on site, like a floor drain, anything leading directly into a storm sewer, I would seal, because there's no purpose for that, you know. If we're washing the floor or cleaning it up, you know, there's a proper way to dispose of that, obviously. In terms of if there's cracks or anything like that, I mean, that's just another thing that we have to look at. But, you know, sealing the floor and it's cinder block walls with a metal frame, and it's 60 years old. But, you know, before I started my business, I spent 15 years plus in the chemical spill response business. So I responded, you know, years ago to Columbus. I responded to McFarland Manufacturing. a lot in Chicago, Milwaukee. And one of the things I was talking with the chief about, just with my background, between a great respect for chemicals and how they can react, is supporting this area. You know, there's the synergies between storing chemicals and also having our customers know that we've got 500 feet of yellow boom that can be put on a river, or oil dry or absorbent boom. And those things all kind, you know, the customers I have and the vendors that I use, they all kind of use the same materials, drums, totes, you know, things like that. So there are certainly some synergies there. And like I said, based on my experience, you know, cleaning up spills and going to factories and everything else, and for what it's worth, I can tell you, I almost never did a spill at a warehouse, because the warehouse is just taking out of a trailer, you know, putting it on the ground, and that's it. What I did a lot of is out on the road, right? And we have our own trucks too. Someone cuts somebody off, you know, they got to lock up their brakes. Company bringing sulfuric acid into a treatment facility and thinking there's 500 gallons in the tank, when actually there's 1,500 gallons and overflowing thousands of gallons that goes into a drain that happens to lead to a creek. I mean, there's the known and the unknown, and what I propose is full transparency. You guys know exactly what we're storing. You can visit anytime you want. You know, that doesn't concern me in the least. Just like you can look up my safety record, you know, trucking. I mean, it's all available. Versus someone that I've heard stories, hey, they're stacking up all this material outside. You know, we weren't able to do anything about that. It's not worth it, you know, for me, from my perspective. So I think there are great synergies with the city and the surrounding community. Yeah.
So I have a quick question. So in your letter, you said that you weren't going to be storing any kind of flammable gases type
Correct.
thing. So the kind of chemicals that you are actually transporting that you'd be storing there are just average chemicals that like American Packaging would use, and or can you just give us a few more examples? I mean, what the chemical is for, not necessarily the fact that it's a hazardous material, because I want a reference point.
I mean, let's face it. I mean, when you see a truck with placards that looks, you know, intimidating, and chemicals, you have to have a great respect. I mean, you're maintenance, right? I mean, I dealt with it all, you know, reactions between potassium permanganate and organics, which cause, you know, explosions. That's when you're manufacturing, blending, things like that. The chemicals that we haul, the vast majority is sodium hydroxide, right? Kind of a caustic cleaner. Potassium permanganate's used in, you know, food. I mean, sometimes it surprises people, but years ago when I first started in the business, I went to a company in Peru, Illinois, and they had all sorts of placards, red, warning, you know, for, and health hazard, and this and that. And I'm looking at all these tanks, and I asked the guy, I'm like, my God, what do you guys do here? He goes, we make shampoo. And so the chemicals, if you look at your shampoo, has really nasty chemicals just on a small dose. A lot of cities use, you know, fluorosilicic acid, but for fluoride. So when you brush your teeth, you get a tiny dose of fluoride to protect the enamel. Okay, that's stored in a glass tank underground and is extremely hazardous, okay? But the chemicals that we haul, by and large, are used in manufacturing. I mean, American Package. You've got several other companies in the area, you know, Columbus Chemical, obviously. But pool chemicals, you know, a lot of pool chemicals, chlorine, chlorinated, you know, items, things like that. In terms of toluene, again, flammable product, but not something, you know, we're not doing any transferring, sparking, and even like ethanol, materials that, you know, farmers create, you know, off-spec from corn, but we deliver into distilleries. I mean, that's hazardous. When we show up at a distillery with a truckload of, you know, basically grain alcohol, it's flammable. They blend it down and we drink it and have a great time, you know. So again, it's not to downplay the seriousness of it, you know, what we do, but again, you know, it doesn't do me any benefit to make people think that they're in an unsafe environment, you know. And the chemicals that we haul, that we transport, are used in everyday manufacturing. If you guys work at facilities or own companies, you take in those chemicals. I deliver them to you in a lot of respects, or Hydrite or Hawkins or any of these other distributors. They're moving dozens of truckloads a day. So it's just, we've got a 55-gallon drum versus a little container underneath your sink, but we all know what Drano can do.
Right. That's exactly was my point, because I've got about a dozen chemicals underneath my sink that are considered hazardous.
And the people like at our facility, they have to go through 40-hour HAZWOPER training, and that's specific training on how to deal with chemicals, what PPE to wear, et cetera, et cetera. I think a lot of companies don't tell the employees what they're dealing with until, the person passes out or, the vapors, I used to clean up plating lines and I would have my crew in full level B, and unfortunately these workers were walking around staring at us, go, why are you wearing supplied air? And I'm like, well, you've got a cyanide and you've got an acid which shouldn't be next to each other. So again, how we treat it is different. I know what it is versus someone else who says, just take the drums off the truck, put them in the bag.
So a question on that, what size containers, what's the largest size containers you might have on site?
Yeah, so a 350-gallon tote is the largest. And that's a lot. I mean, 350 gallons is, a large tote, but no bulk hauling. I mean, if you see these gasoline tankers, they can haul up to 7,000 gallons. I know there's a grain distributor mill right by this facility. So again, what we're taking is on vans, reefer trailers, things like that. The smallest would be, you've got boxed containers in boxes, 5-gallon pails.
So if you guys have a spill, I assume there's no ventilation system. This would go out the doors and windows?
Well, again, I just did a tour of the facility. There's no huge HVAC system pumping air out, blowing it out into the, the surroundings or anything like that. If you have a spill, depending what it is, you neutralize it, you use oil dry, there's a quick response to it, but you would have to spill a large quantity for it to even be noticeable, but a lot of this stuff.
I'm kind of curious about the, can you describe how the inside will look?
Sure.
Do you segregate the different materials? Are they in bunkers or curbed areas or something like that? So if there's a spill inside, it's contained with its own stuff?
So, we know the place isn't perfectly level, but the way I envision, you have an area, and then this is anyone who's been in a big manufacturing plant, you have yellow tape marking an area for your people to walk down, or forklift operators. The chemicals are segregated based on customers, but really based on the chemical itself. So you would have sodium hydroxide, all your caustics in one area, corrosives in another, flammables in another, and then your non-haz, like I talked about, the basic stuff that people are using, oil dry, boom, things like that. That's in a whole separate area. So they're segregated, they're marked, they're tagged when they come in. You keep track of them the whole time because as a warehouse, I charge people for storage or when we unload or when we load. So everything's segregated. And to be honest, I mean, there's inside cameras, outside cameras, so I can monitor it from, wherever, but also customers can view it. And if someone from the fire department or city wants to come and get a tour, they can have a tour. There's nothing flashy about it. It's, to be honest, it's somewhat dull in comparison to a manufacturer anyway.
You said that you'd segregate by customer, but also by content. Would you have customers that might have things next to each other that could react? If one customer has bleach, the other one's got ammonia, are those nearby, or do you separate all of them?
So the big ones are like your oxidizers, right? And if they had a, corrosive caustic, keeping materials like that separate, period. Like I said, with a customer, most of them understand that, and they just want to know, they want to see it on their system that you've logged it in, see it on their system when you log it out. But the chemicals themselves would be, segregated based on what they are.
All right, I have some questions. First of all, I wanted to follow up on your totes. Are you gonna be plastic totes or the metal reusable totes?
So you see both, to be honest. You see the plastic within the cages, right, with the valve on the base, and then you have some metal ones.
Okay. So I've had the unique experience of working for one of the customers you mentioned, a chemical company, and I have a few questions. Do you have any intention to offer or to perform drop-in swaps where you're going to drop that trailer in the yard with no containment and wait for the next day for the next truck to come pick it up?
Well, there certainly would be occasions where we would park a trailer with chemicals in it, yes.
Okay. And do you plan on having containment?
There would not be separate containment. You know, you bring in a load and you're not unloading it and it's going out the next day. Yeah, I mean, it's in the trailer, it's considered in transit, not required, but yeah.
It's still in transit, right? You had mentioned earlier, if someone cuts off a truck driver, slam on the brakes, you have a load shift. You know, I know bungs and bung caps dislodge very easily. I also know that when you're dealing with a warehouse storage, it smells.
Right.
Absolutely smells. Do you have any plan to curb emissions or the presence of that smell? Because that was one of the number one complaint we got from every neighbor within 10 blocks. It's a larger facility.
Yeah, no, okay. Yeah, I mean, again, besides having to put in heat, because it doesn't have heat, so probably not much would go in this winter if it was to move forward, is having some kind of, you know, a general filtration system, you know, to evacuate the air on an ongoing basis and, you know, recirculate it. In terms of like our own trailers, and just to give you an idea in transit, you know, all our trailers have E-track, vertical, horizontal bars, straps to secure them. If a load shifts, it's not going to shift dramatically. If someone backs in, looks like they've got a couple drums in question, you know, we address it right away.
And for your reefer storage you're mentioning?
That's reefer trailers?
Reefer trailers?
Heated trailers, yeah.
Okay.
That's all it is. We would not be having low temperature materials stored at the site.
Okay, that was my next question.
Nothing temperature sensitive.
Okay. Yeah, because, you know, different chemicals combust at
They sure do.
lower temperature than you would expect. Bear with me here, I'm going through my list. Have you ever operated solely a hazardous storage facility?
No.
Do you have experience working in a hazardous storage facility?
Yes, also a disposal site, and that was different. That was hazardous waste, but also, like I said, the years in the chemical spill response.
Will you have security on site?
You mean like a
after hours?
Ongoing person on site? No, that's not the plan.
That's good for now, thank you.
Can you clarify that last one? Either inside or outside of hours? I mean, during business hours, you have an office staff
Correct.
there. Outside of those hours you named, you don't plan on staffing the facility?
Correct.
Okay.
I just thought one more thing, I'm sorry. We've talked about drums and totes. What about super sacks, like phthalic anhydride super sacks?
Yeah, boy, to be honest, I don't transport much of it. We don't see much of it. They're just tough to wield, so to speak, move, and yeah. But I mean, it's certainly a possibility. I could get a super sack, you know, even a oil dray. Some mostly non-haz components are shipped in super sacks.
This is the number one problem that I experienced in a super sack with your pork lip's gonna puncture it.
Absolutely.
Many times.
Yeah, and that's why customers kind of gravitate away from those as much as possible.
Right. How are you regulated? Is it EPA or DNR, and do they come out and do regular kind of inspections? And are those reports that we could see on a regular basis?
So the only thing right now you see is you can go online, do this, you know, safer score for E-way transit and look up, you know, any kind of violations, whether, you know, seatbelt, speeding, things like that. They also have out of service, you know, if you're ever put out of service, you can be put out of service for something, you know, missing a placard on a trailer, you know, so it can vary. There's no regulation besides, you know, submitting a document every year to the Department of Transportation Pipeline Safety saying, I'd like to transport hazardous materials. And I got to be honest with you, the bar of entry is extremely low. Anyone who gives the money pretty much can get that certificate, sadly. I mean, I'm competing against guys that still run paper logs and, you know, so DOT regulates the trucking side of things. When I went to get the extra hazmat permit, DOT did a full audit, satisfactory rating, difficult to get. Once you have a storage facility or transfer, Estes, Conway, Yellow, all these guys, nobody audits them. Nobody, you know, they're moving more hazardous materials than I would ever move. You know, they're just cross-docking this stuff all day long. And, you know, just handling it in a much quicker fashion, which is why a lot of my customers prefer not to do it that way, because they don't know where their freight is or why it's 3 days late, 4 days late. I've got better control on that. But yeah, we're not regular. DNR would only show up if there was an issue. And like I said, I know decades ago there was an issue. DNR gets involved. You know, they do sampling, testing, remediation if required. Something like this, they would not be involved. EPA would not be involved unless there was something of critical nature. You know, someone called and said, hey, there's an orange plume coming out of here, you know, then they would be involved.
And I have one other question, if you don't mind. I know you have a facility in Windsor. I'm an ex-Windsor resident, and so I know you're familiar probably with the businesses in the area. And somebody else had brought up smell. And the DeForest Windsor area had a horrible issue with Sanimax.
Oh, well.
Yeah. And so my question is it going to be similar kind of issues?
No, because Sanimax, companies that deal with bulk waste, Darling International, companies that deal with liquid fat, I mean, it's horrific, the smell. Even manufacturers blending chemicals. I mean, you know, I used to work in Chicago. Stickney, Illinois is one of the larger coal tar, you know, they make coal tar, and I mean, it reeks. I mean, you smell it from miles and miles away. We're not doing any blending, packaging, opening up things. You know, we're literally just caretakers of that product in and out. But, you know, some of the manufacturers going to have off gases, odors when they're pouring contents of the 55-gallon drum and they're pumping it into 5-gallon pails so their maintenance crew can clean it. That's exposure. You know, that's the possibility of things spilling. That's, you know, taking liquid from this thing and transferring it to that. There's none of that. We're not going to have any storage tanks on site. You're not going to see anything outside besides the trailers and the trucks.
Thank you.
So I have just a couple of questions. So my first question is, so would you feel comfortable if you lived in Columbus living next to your building?
Oh, I'd be out here too, first and foremost. I'd want to meet.
But how would you feel about living next door to it?
Well, in Naperville, I lived next door to a manufacturer, and at first I was a little hesitant, right? And then there was a 4-track train that went bellowing by, you know, every night. And I was fine with it, and I can't tell people, like, you should be comfortable, right? All I can do is say, listen, this is how we're going to operate. I know there's previous tenants, other businesses there that may or may not have angered you or bothered you or, you know, affected the value of your properties. But, you know, again, from my background, yes, I'm comfortable, but I would be doing the same thing. I'd be grilling the person and trying to find out what they're about and who they are.
My next question is, you talked about the audits that you had to do for DNR and the DOT. Is
Not
that what you
DNR,
said?
just DOT.
DOT. Is there any way that we could get copies of that audit so that we could read it?
No, only because all you can do, when you look online, down at the bottom, it says satisfactory rating, right? Which means I went through a full DOT audit. All I've got is a letter from them showing that it's
says that you
satisfactory.
did, that it was fine?
Yeah, and the correspondence, I mean, if you wanted the emails between me and the DOT agent, I don't have a problem with that, but it's just like, hey, let me look at your payroll, let me look at your insurance, do drug test, let me see the test results for these 5 individuals, you know, things like that. Right. And I have an independent group that does, you know, our testing. It's a company called Fleetworthy. So that we are heavily regulated, more so than most industries. Hours of service, drug testing, you name it. But there, you know, if you were to say, well, I want to see that whole audit, that would be tough.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then my last question is for Kyle. Can you say that again, why we have to get a conditional use permit if it's just normal manufacturing liquids?
It's not manufactured, just storage.
So if they were manufacturing with it, that would be a permitted use, and they could store as much as they wanted as part of the process. They could do dry cleaning, they could have a feed mill, they could have a towing and wrecker service, and they could have a heavy motor vehicle parking lot and park semis full of chemicals, and that'd be permitted by right. it's because they're storing hazardous materials. That makes it a conditional use, which means it's allowable, but gives the Plan Commission the opportunity to put in conditions to address any concerns.
So you mentioned something about being outdoors. Are those, when you're talking about storing chemicals outdoors, is that the trucks that Andy was talking about? Or are you going to be storing all your chemicals that are going to other companies inside the building?
Everything's stored inside,
Except for those trailers that you were talking about?
except for the trailers. The chemicals are in the trailers. Nothing's going to be on the ground.
Okay.
Nothing.
Well, unless it leaks.
Yeah,
I mean, honestly, right?
Yes. If it leaks, it would be on the ground.
So I have another couple of questions for you. In every manufacturing facility I've worked in, our hazardous chemicals, especially the stored chemicals, were in a separate room, usually a concrete room, usually at a fire door with a fusible link, for the paint or the solvents. Will your flammable chemicals be stored like that, where they're secured and in a fireproof room?
No, they would not be in a fireproof room. And, that's the difference between a manufacturer, a company that has lots of opportunities to spark, or, if they're doing welding or, torch, cutting, et cetera, they have separate rooms for the chemicals just to keep it isolated from the manufacturing processes. But again, if you look at what I do in warehouses, even Walmart, Menards, they take in massive amounts of chemicals. They don't segregate them besides saying, okay, this is lot A, lot B. Oh, we took in all the pool chemicals from that vendor. That all goes over here. They're just all out in the open, ready to be shipped to the next point. So to answer your question, there would not be a specific room, concrete room, passcode entry, for flammables, things like that. They'd all be stored out in the warehouse for anyone to view.
Then to follow up, I did a little looking for how to manage some of these chemicals, and it's very brief, so I apologize if it doesn't apply. But so one of the EPA regulations was 40 CFR 264. I don't know if this applies to you guys. Is the sump containment? They recommend 10% of all the products on site have sump containment for that volume. Do you plan to do that?
Yeah, so again, with like a warehouse or a facility like this where you're just storing it, and somebody brought up the fact that the walls, there may be gaps and, other things. Usually you would come in, you'd put like a lip, just like an epoxy lip, around the whole base, so nothing can get out. Now, it's 38,000 square feet. If you do that surrounding the whole thing, I mean, you could, in theory, have quite a bit spill and be self-contained in that. But, like a small auto shop or someone who's got 2 drums, they might have a container or actually like a poly, graded box that they set the chemicals on. So if, something spills, it's all contained.
But, so you don't plan to do that?
There would not be a specific containment area. Everything would be stored, within the facility.
Do you know if this facility would be required to maintain that, the 264?
Again, you would have to provide some way of containing it. Again, from my perspective, and what would fall under it is if the walls are sealed, if there's no gaps or anything between the floor and the walls, that is sufficient for containment.
Is that something you plan on doing?
Yes. It has to be done, because I see the cracks and, whether it's the rodents, et cetera, I mean, there's some fissures, in the cinder block walls. So, I mean, there's quite a bit that needs to be done. But again, from my perspective, that's small cost. The biggest cost is heating the place and the roof.
Brad, did you get your questions answered, or do you have?
Yeah, so I just want to clarify, that's a no, that you're not going to do that. I just want to make sure. Yeah, I think for questions, I've got comments later, but I think just for questions, I think I'm done.
Okay. What I was hearing on that last one, that containment will be on a overall general building basis, not by like lot by lot, bunker by bunker.
Yeah. Well, but I don't agree with that. If you've got a loading dock or a flat door anywhere, you've got to have a curb. I mean, you may have 38,000 feet, but you need a lip somewhere. You know, the wall over here doesn't matter if the door over there is open. So, and it depends, you know, you lose a storage rack, you could have thousands of gallons, and it depends where it's at, and depends which way all the floors are tipped.
Yeah, everything would be on the
Obviously,
floor.
it's older, so who knows where they go.
There would not be any storage racks or, everything would be on the floor.
Okay.
I got Mike Myers on Zoom. Mike, I don't want to forget about you. Do you have anything else?
Yeah, I do, and I apologize if my questions are redundant here in most of it. But a couple of questions on the chemicals, obviously. Are there requirements or restrictions on how much volume or quantities of these chemicals you can store in one facility? Or are they just, you can store as much as you want?
You can store as much as you want.
You can store as much as you want? Okay. And does the facility need to be climate controlled for any of these chemicals?
The facility needs to be climate controlled for the employees. The chemicals themselves, the flammables, that would not be an issue. But some of the other product, if it gets cold enough, would be. So it would be, you know, you're probably looking at warehouse temperature, you know, average temperature around 65 degrees. But there's not going to be any chemicals that are so temperature sensitive to either react because it gets above, you know, 20 degrees or, you know, turn into, you know, solid mass if it's below 70.
And is it, I think you talked about this early on, the trucks going in and out of the facility, are they going to be just your trucks or other trucking companies?
Yeah, they're mostly our trucks. There could be some other companies coming in that the customer is contracted or a vendor is contracted. So a truck could come from, you know, South Holland, Illinois, bringing up a load of empty drums because, you know, the company in South Holland uses them to transport those drums.
Okay. And the reason I asked the question was some of the public comments, lots of concerns about the inbound, outbound traffic, damaging to their properties and those types of things. And Kyle, this might be a question for you. How do we hold people accountable for that? Is that something that we hold this business owner accountable for it? Doesn't matter whose truck it is? Or is it, I guess I don't know how you manage that.
Yeah, I think generally you ask the property owner or the user of the property to exert some kind of control. You know, there's limits to everything, but I think you can establish good operating procedures and guidelines, and you can establish conditions that reinforce that and make sure that they do have a certain condition that would maybe address that. And then you can enforce, you know, if that's not followed, you can then sort of address that angle of it.
It's going to fall back to us, right? Like we're the property owner. If someone drives over somebody's lot, I'm going to be getting a phone call, and it's up to me to go after that carrier or that customer that sent them, you know, to rectify the situation. You know, that's just the simplest way of doing it. Now, in terms of getting to that property, I mean, I look, you know, driven it a few times. To me, there seems to just be one good route. The same route that, you know, the grain mill runs, versus cutting through that backside of the neighborhood. You know, I'm not interested in doing that. What I'd end up doing with that property is put basically a, you know, like a horseshoe in the front so trucks can pull in, you know, straighten out, then back directly in and not even use that side street entry. I think that's a recipe for disaster over there.
And just one more last question. I think you already answered it, but I wasn't sure I heard the answer. No outside storage. There were some questions or concerns about the aesthetics of the building, big piles of inventory outside the building. That won't happen, garbage, those types of things?
No outside storage.
Of garbage.
All right, thank you.
Of any product that we carry, besides what's in the
on
truck.
A trailer
On the trailer.
is still outside storage.
Yeah.
And I had a question about.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. I had a question about that, Kyle. Would that fall under the outdoor storage?
I believe if it's in a licensed motor vehicle in transit, that is not storage.
Okay, so that was the difference you were talking about. Okay, all right.
Nothing, Mariah. Your fork trucks, you plan on having battery powered fork trucks or propane? And how would you store that in relation to your chemicals?
Well, initially, to be honest, I mean, you'd just be using the battery operated, pallet jacks. Like I said, it's going to take a ramp up period between getting the building to where it needs to be, where, the city comes through and says, hey, this looks great, and getting materials in. To be honest, a year from now, it could be 90% non-hazardous materials. I've got all of a sudden a couple of customers that say, we'll take everything. We'll take all your space for boom and oil dry and, supplies like that. Instead of being a Trojan horse and coming in and asking for storage, non-haz stuff, and then suddenly coming back and go, oh, I'd like to put some hazardous materials, I figured I'll go for it, which, again, precipitates a certain type of response. But, so again, it could be 6 months to a year before you start seeing any kind of what I call steady traffic, a couple of loads a day.
With your DOT regulations, will you be required to have on file at all times all the safety data sheets for every chemical you'll be storing there?
The customer's required, to give us safety data sheets for any of the loads. Because we're storing there, yes. So you could come in and say, all right, I see this is toluene or, ethylbenzene or TKE, sodium hydroxide, sulfuric. Let me see the Amastias on that, All
right, and then, and the safety data sheet explains everything about the chemical, how to clean it up if there's a spill, the hazards.
Yep.
Yeah. And then just one more comment about on the DOT side of it. Did you have any comment about the approximate 27% of your inspections resulting in violations?
Well, again, I don't want to do tit for tat because we'd have to pull it up on the screen, but our safety record, is considered stellar in the sense that there's a couple things you look at. Assuming you have the right MC number, the first screen you have is out of service violations. It has equipment, drivers, hazmat, okay? And so for equipment, I think we have one in the last 2 years. Now, again, when you have a DOT officer, he's not your friend, okay? And anyone, who's driven before, I mean, these guys go through you tooth and, comb. I mean, they really want to inspect. I've had 0 out of service for drivers, which means they're hours, they're logs. So DOT officer pulls us over, plugs in right to our ELD, looks at all the pages, last 10 days. They'll put you out of service if they see you exceeded your hours, you didn't take your break, anything like that. Hazmat, the most recent one, was out of service. It was because 2 placards were missing on the side of the trailer. As you're driving, they just can get sucked out. Now we have plexi pieces that you can put in there. But, beyond that, like I said, in order to get a satisfactory rating, you have to do a good job, period. They're not going to waste their time coming out and putting you through that. So, again, the percentage, if you said 27%, that's not accurate.
Well, if you had 36 inspections, maybe my math's wrong, but 10 violations is.
Well, when you say violation, there's literally things where it's, air pressure, was below this PSI. If a driver doesn't have a seatbelt, obviously that's a violation with, severity. But all those things get broken down. But at the end of the day, they really focus in on out of service. Are you a company that when you get inspected? Now, if you look at our equipment, it's top notch, and that's why we don't get out of service for equipment, and our drivers run legal. I pay them hourly. Very few trucking companies pay their guys hourly. I pay my guys hourly plus overtime, plus bonuses for safety. And that's just so I get guys that aren't hotheads and speeding around. So that's why they earn a lot of money, but that's how we're able to maintain a good safety record.
And then on the topic of safety, being that you've never, operated your own
warehouse
storage facility, do you have a safety plan?
Yes.
Can you provide that to the city?
As soon as we're all wrapped up, I'd be happy to. Absolutely.
Thanks.
Did we lose Mike?
think he just blocked it.
Oh, gotcha.
One more, you're right. So,
Yeah, can you still hear me?
Yep, I can.
yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. My Zoom went down, but I still have audio.
So just to clarify, Eric, and thank you for being upfront with all this, appreciate it. Is in a facility like this, you said, you know, when this is set up, there's no one goes through to check this, because that was some current concerns from several people and myself too, is unless there's an incident, you know, the EPA, DNR, OSHA don't come in to say you're set up correctly. Correct. Only if something goes wrong is they might respond to that.
And, you know, every city is different. I mean, you could say in order for you to open up, we want to inspect it with the fire department, fire chief, and, you know, so you could have different rules, parameters, but there's, DNR is not going to come in because I'm purchasing this. Nor is OSHA. Yeah.
We do have routine fire inspections for all commercial buildings, so.
Okay.
I believe they're supposed to be twice a year. Not that they always meet that, depending on staffing and access to the buildings.
That was going to be my question. How often and how up to date is our current fire department on inspections?
I believe the current status is pretty up to where they should be. I think there was a backlog previously, but Chief Hazeltine has kind of made this a priority to get the inspections back to where they should be.
Other questions?
Comments.
Yep, I bet everybody does. So if we're done with questions, at least for now, Eric, go ahead and have a seat. We'll deliberate up here. And Brad, you want to start?
Sure. So again, you know, I appreciate everybody's work with all this, but my concerns with this, the biggest one is really the railroad behind it. I checked in, and we have 15 to 20 derailments a year in the state, and you know, it's so close to the rail line, and then sandwiched between that and the residential areas. You know, my biggest concern is something like that, where you get an accordion type of derailment, or even one car, and you know, we've got bleach, sodium hypochlorite, chlorate, vinegars, acids, ammonias, hydrogen peroxide. A lot of these mixtures can make chlorine or chloramine gas, which is very, very bad. Not to mention just, you know, 1,000 pounds of ammonia or gallons of ammonia or alcohol right next to these residences, and that's a really big concern for mine. Yeah, and with that, you know, I think there's a lot better places that this thing could be situated. This is not a hardship that, you know, we have to put this thing in here. There's a lot of better choices, and I think this is a really bad spot for something like this.
So my only comment is I would actually like to get more information. I would like to look and find out if we can look at, you know, the DOT audit that he did, that it says that it passed. And I would like and if Kyle could help us with this, if he could pull up any of this, like, you know, obviously we mentioned the safety plan. Mm-hmm. And if there's any other information that we could be provided to not only to make us more comfortable, but to make the community more comfortable.
I would like to see that we get a report from a plumber or another certified person saying that he can block the drains adequately in case of runoff before we make a decision.
So you know, obviously, you know, real life experience working in a chemical warehouse. I have the same feelings as every resident in this room from the chemical storage, the smells, the driver issues. And like, it's real life experience. I'm not just speculating on what could happen. This is what has happened and what I've lived. that, along with, first of all, we're going to make a decision, but it's the council's decision whether we approve this or say no. Even if we say no, it's going to the council. So I want you to continue to be this passionate, whichever way it goes. If it goes to the next meeting, you get to continue to be passionate in this. So, at this time, I would not be in favor of this, especially because of my real life experience working at a chemical company.
Mike, do you have any comments?
We can't hear you, Mike.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I mean, from a manufacturing perspective, or whatever the property is zoned for today, I'm not sure that the storage of the hazardous material, there's going to be lots of requirements, and the building needs to get up to speed to be able to support the material part of it. And it sounds to me that there's lots of concerns about just the inbound, basically the company or the business starting up again. Since Gar Plastics has moved out in the past, there hasn't been the truck traffic, which obviously is, I guess the residents obviously like that. But it sounds like we would be able to hold them accountable for any of the damages and those types of things on the inbound, outbound. I can't say that I'm against or for, but I don't think there's much difference in what was already there, knowing that the hazardous materials would be managed properly.
Okay. I don't know, I think I'm probably about of the same temperature as Brad, right? There's, I think there's some positives that would come out of this, right? There's some concerns that got brought up about loitering or a vacant building, and ostensibly an occupied building and an active building isn't that attractive nuisance that it might be now, right? So some of those things might improve. It's a difficult thing, right? We have, or another positive would be some things that the old plastics company was allowed to continue doing because they were, for lack of a better term, grandfathered in, would be changed now, with a new business coming in. Things would no longer be allowed to just have the status quo. So I think there's a positive change to the property from that standpoint. Eric, I like everything you said about, making that distinction between a business that is mixing or handling open chemicals versus what you are doing. I think that's a really important distinction to make. There's always that risk of accident, right? And something I always struggle with is, while we understand there's always a risk of an accident anywhere, how do we put a proper, how do we set the dial properly to the likelihood of that risk happening, right? That's a thing that's always just struggled to think and decide on. I am a bit concerned with outdoor, the drop and swap, right? Those kind of things that just seems to me like that might be a little more either, prone to vandalism, prone to an undetected and uncontained leak of some kind. I'm surprised that there's not a SWIP, an industrial SWIP required to be on file with DNR or other local agencies. I'm a little surprised at that. Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan.
MS3, so, or
Four.
MS4.
We're on 4 now.
I would say that's probably maybe one.
Yeah, and it might be size of property too. I don't remember what governs that. But I also would be interested to see a traffic plan. Like either what was happening with Gar Plastics was they had sloppy drivers, or there was physically not enough infrastructure to let them get in and out the way they needed to. And you had kind of talked a little bit about what an improvement might be, but if you're asking for a proposal based on existing infrastructure, we might want to see what that existing infrastructure can actually be able to handle as far as truck maneuvering, right? Is it a loop up Birdsey and down Main? Do we confine traffic strictly to Birdsey? So I'd like to see some of that. So it's not site plan per se, but it's got site plan elements to it.
So like a traffic impact analysis you're asking for?
Yeah, I mean, a TIA a lot of times has to do with traffic counts and things like that, but more of a
it's a
maneuvering plan?
Yeah, it's a site plan,
Sure.
operation plan, maneuvering
Yeah,
plan,
right.
yeah. Wouldn't be a TIA, but.
Right.
On the site,
Yeah.
on the roads surrounding the
Yeah,
site?
site and adjacent to
I
site.
think it's a routing plan. I don't do them, but it's a traffic routing plan for the site itself. Like, how do they get in and out? So
Right.
they don't have to back over people's yards and stuff.
Right. If there's physically no way to do it without driving over a lawn continuously, then that's an infrastructure problem, right? And then there's the whole question of, well, are you saddled with this infrastructure problem that the city might have or whatever? But I think that's important to know what the possibilities are, what the impossibilities are. I am curious, I mean, there's a lot of postulation about, well, this could go this place or that place or the other place, right? But, I mean, I am curious, were other locations considered?
No.
Okay. I know you said this building was attractive from its location and also it seemed to be right-sized. Is that some of the attraction? Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
One of the things that we have to consider as a commission is making sure that the conditional use will not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property. And in that, we also need to consider impairment to property values. So taking into account a comment that was made prior that this is considered a defect, is it a defect because of his business, or would it have been considered a defect when Gar Plastics was operating as well?
That might be for the real estate agent, but I know that there's already contamination on site from the previous owners. The DNR has been involved with the previous contamination. So it is a contaminated site regardless of what you decide this evening. Actually getting a responsible party on that property is, somewhat beneficial to keep it from falling into, any other problems.
Are we allowed to hear from the Realtor who is here?
You can hear from anyone the commission wants to hear from. I'm not sure whether or not that would be in a quasi-judicial setting, the same as an assessor, for whatever that's worth. No, I'm just saying there's a statutory difference. That's the only thing. Realtors do work in property values all the time, but on the city side, they often don't take the realtor's value, they take the assessor's value.
I'd love to get her unqualified opinion.
Well, I'd like to know that my license means something, Sarah. All right, so I have a definition that was given by John's attorney, or by John's realtor. Her and I are in the same office. Am I on? Yeah. And that was actually escalated to the Keller Williams attorney. So this is a very gray area because this has not been passed yet. But per the definition of a defect, it's a condition that would have a significant adverse effect on the value of the property, that would significantly impair the health or safety of future occupants of the property. When I hear that definition, this to me is the exact definition of a defect, because that would negatively impact the resale values around that area because of the possibility that some type of accident could happen down the road. But couldn't that have also been true when our plastics was operating? It was never, I mean, Travis, when did you purchase your home?
From 2019.
And was that ever disclosed? Yeah, and there is a right to disclose. There is a real estate condition report that is legally needs to be filled out by a seller when they sell their property. And if a real estate agent knows about a material adverse effect, which would be along these lines, they have a legal right to disclose. That is our license on the line, how unqualified it may be.
But your question kind of revolves around whether it's this business or Gar Plastics or
Right.
any other permitted use here. I mean,
Or American, packaging comes
you
in
spoke a couple
and
times
uses the
about
same
the fact
chemicals.
that there
Right.
could be a permitted use that might be
Or the rail yard with
Right.
tankers of cyanide going by. Yeah.
just as much of a detriment that would go in without even ever having to come to this body. So
I am happy to share the email from this attorney. If you guys would like to see it, I mean, this is a professional attorney who has his lawyer. I can't talk tonight. I'm sorry, guys, but this is something that this is not only it's not only scary for people who are in the area, but it's also scary for property values. I mean, and as a real estate agent, that would be a huge question. Big, scary buildings scare people away, and especially if they know what's being housed there. That point blank. I've been dealing with buyers for over 8 years, and this is something that could negatively impact every single property that lines up with that, as well as some extending out. I know you're talking about previously with Gar Plastics, but we're talking about the now. If this is a potential, and I am definitely pro-business, just pro-business somewhere else, not in the middle of a residential area.
Kyle, is there a way we can get our own opinion as to whether it would be the same for any other business or just this specific business is being targeted?
I can ask the assessor to speculate, like if a permitted use like a wrecker service or manufacturing or a feed mill started there, but it's going to be difficult, I think, because until the conditions exist, it's hard to find comparables to say, that's almost like forensic assessment. Because
You'd have to do comparables for property that before it had a storage facility versus, it didn't. Yes, it would be very difficult.
Well, I guess
I would agree with, I've been in manufacturing 30 years, and I've been in all kinds of facilities all around the state, and so I understand it pretty well. And the storage facility scares me more than the manufacturing. Eric's right, when you're handling, opening, manufacturing these things, or, recombining, that is very risky. But typically in the places I worked is you had less chemicals because you're using them, getting rid of them, using them, getting rid of them. You don't store tons of them. In fact, most just-in-time inventories keep the inventories very, very low as you possibly can handle. You don't have, months worth of them. So in my experience in those, the big storage facility scares me more than the other ones, even though there are some positives because you're not opening them. But perception-wise, absolutely, in my opinion.
That makes sense. Thank you.
So I think we need to do our due diligence as a commission. So we have questions that we need to have answered from other individuals, whether it's inspections that have been qualified or the traffic survey or whatever it was that Erie wanted. I think I personally do not feel like I can make a decision on this because Andy is right. This is going to go to council and we need to have all our ducks in a row, whether we hopefully they would be, if we don't approve of it, this is why. So we have and if we do approve it, this is why. I think it needs to be pretty well organized, and I think we need more information. And maybe information from an unbiased person. Whether that be, the city attorney,
I want to make sure I'm hearing what we had talked about needing correctly. So we're asking for a traffic routing plan, a site plan. We're asking for a plumber or some sort of plan that is going to show that there is not improper drainage. And
A safety plan.
A safety plan.
A safety plan in case something comes up.
And did I already say this one, a ventilation system plan to ensure that there's not bad odor and there's good air quality for employees?
Are we asking for a ventilation plan, or are we asking for a narrative on how ventilation will be accomplished? Those are two different things in terms of the lift we're asking the applicant.
Yeah, and you have to
Tell me the
clarify that one if it's,
Yeah.
I'm not sure this is possible. You know, if you don't want to vent all this stuff outside, you keep it inside, but to keep the air quality good for the employees means you vent it outside. I don't think it's possible to have that many charcoal filters to absorb, you know, all those odors. It's either inside or outside, one of the two.
Uriah, does DNR have exclusive authority over environmental discharges by air? Like airborne?
Not my section.
Okay.
Like an emissions testing?
Yeah.
I don't know. But that, I
know in
could
other
get you 2 clicks
communities-
into the website and get you
Yeah.
pointed in the right direction.
We had a grain dryer that would spew out little corn hulls, and I believe at that time, anything that was emitted into the air was their baby, and they had exclusive rights to kind of make the rules and enforce them. And I think the local, we were preempted from it, but I don't know that in this case.
My experience with that, Kyle, was the EPA. But could be wrong.
That was my guess too.
Well, I have 3 things on the list: a safety plan, a traffic plan, and a plumbing.
Drainage plan, yeah. And do we want to see anything on a fire suppression system beforehand?
I was going to ask what was the plan for fire suppression sprinklers? Like, can you explain what is required by code, and then maybe anything you are planning on doing above and beyond that?
By code, that's the city, correct me if I'm wrong, would be coming up with that. There is no existing sprinkler system, which was a concern I addressed when I initially looked at the property. Like, it doesn't have one. Is that going to be required? If the city requires it, then it becomes more of, looking at the numbers and, what it would take. And again, not every chemical responds well with water. So, that's the other thing. Generally, it could be, you could say, well, we want it very specific, and then it becomes literally just a business plan. Does this, make sense versus looking at, other options? But there is not an existing system right now. Nor was it my plan to put one in.
So then that would be incorporated into your safety plan if something happens.
And I know it was in our packet and in the staff report, but basically the comment from the chief was that the fire chief had no particular concern.
Correct, he was actually looking forward to working with Eric.
Okay. All right.
I am agreeing with Shelley. We don't have enough information to make any kind of decision.
Right. Plus we need to take into consideration what we heard tonight from residents. So, if everybody is done deliberating, I'd be willing to make a motion to table it, to table this agenda item.
Yeah, Mike.
I just have one other comment, so the actual drains in the floor, has there been any final judgment on that? What needs to be done there, sealed off or replumbed, or what is the plan for that? Will they seal all drains out of that building?
So I believe what I heard is that he wanted to seal the drains because they don't really actually want them. But one of the conditions is that we want some kind of evaluation from a plumber that can actually happen, that those drains can be segregated to prevent releases into the storm sewer system and then into the river.
Yeah, current building code doesn't have any floor drain going to the sanitary system anyway, so, it's... Okay, do we have a specific ask?
This is what traffic, the drainage, the fire.
You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to ask to entertain a motion to either recommend approval, denial, or to table, and if,
Well, I think Shelley already made a motion to table.
I can do it. So yes, I'd like to make a motion to table this for more information. We would like to see those safety plans that we talked about. And then also, I mean, I know he said it's just a one sheet thing, but I would also like to get some different websites that we could look, because I'm not in manufacturing. I didn't know that I could go and look at the DOT website and look for, like, inspections and or violations and that type of thing. So if you can help us with that to get us going into the right place so that we can investigate this stuff ourselves, that would be great.
And I will second the motion to table.
I would like to ask Kyle a procedural question. Can there be two motions on the table at the same time?
The first motion didn't ever receive a second, and the person making a motion, I think, restated her motion.
we do have a second.
She has a second on the second one. I want to know if I can make a separate motion before voting on other motions.
I think you need to dispose of the first motion that's been seconded before you can make another motion. That's my understanding. Okay. Unless it's a point of order, I think that impacts the existing motion.
No.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor of...
I would like a roll call vote.
Roll call vote. All those in favor of tabling till next meeting, or actually tabling until the items that have been requested?
Yes.
Tabling until the items that have been requested have been submitted and sent to us and a meeting date set. Please take the roll, Kyle.
All right. Albright?
Aye.
Baston?
No.
Traxler?
No.
Monday?
Aye.
Myers?
Aye.
Motive?
Aye.
That motion carries.
Okay. Item is tabled until the meeting after those items have been submitted for commission review. Where is my agenda?
Only one left.
Well, I could probably guess at what that is.
Right, can I
All
have one comment?
Yeah, Brad.
Just to Shelley's comment was about the DNR inspections, or the DOT inspections. That's only for the trucking part and driving around on the roads. It doesn't apply to the facility at all. That's
Or
just
the outside
that's just the
storage.
inspection of trucking procedures.
I heard somebody say that the building was inspected too. Or did I not understand?
I don't think I heard that.
Okay. We've reached number 9. We closed that item. So,
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
any further discussion on adjourning? All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.